Hi, I'm Sherry. For 7 years, my family drained over $350,000 from me while mocking my lifestyle in public. They smiled at brunches, clinked glasses with my money, and told the world I was unstable. But nothing stung more than learning my own parents helped them do it. Why would people who raised you secretly destroy you from the inside out? Have you ever been betrayed by the very people you trusted most? What would you do if your family turned into strangers with your bank account in their hands? And hey, what time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'd really love to know. I didn't sleep that night. My fingers kept drumming the side of my laptop, the living room lit only by the glow of spreadsheet tabs and the slow blink of the router light in the corner. I hadn't looked at these numbers in years, not closely, but something about the way Gypsy smirked, or how my mother joked about still having the house, had unsettled something too long buried. Line by line, I went through 7 years of financial records, transfers labeled emergency, monthly deductions from an account I barely remembered linking to anyone. Then a shared access note tied to a familiar name, Lori Ann Middleton, my mother. My eyes refused to blink as the trail grew clearer. Payments that conveniently coincided with Gypsy's sudden upgrades. First a Lexus, then that ridiculous villa in Tulum she swore was a collab deal. Vacations I was never invited to. Expenses I never approved, never even saw. The kind of pattern no one would notice, unless they were looking. And now I was looking. I called the bank, just to be sure, just to hear someone else say it. Yes, the rep said after a pause. It appears joint activity was authorized. The signature matches the cosigner. That would be Lori Middleton. I couldn't even form a sentence. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was surgical, precise. The kind that slices through muscle while you're still anesthetized. I closed the laptop and sat still long enough to feel the cold through the floorboards. How do you confront someone who smiles while stealing? I whispered to no one. The next morning, Julia texted me out of nowhere. Coffee. I need to vent. Family is insane. We met at a cafe 2 blocks from my condo. She looked frazzled, half regretful, half over-caffeinated. They're already planning another spa trip, she said, stirring her oat milk latte. Gypsy swears your mom's booking the Miami suite again. I blinked. My mom? Yeah, she laughed awkwardly. With your credit line, right? She realized too late. My... What? Julia froze. Oh, God, that's what Gypsy said. I didn't know. But I already knew. I pulled out my phone and opened old credit card statements. Charges at Bal Harbour, St. Regis, designer boutiques, all under Gypsy's name, all on a card I hadn't used in over a year. Julia reached across the table. I didn't mean, Sherry, I thought you knew. I smiled thinly. I do now. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat, in the dark, staring at the wall above my TV where our last full family photo hung. 4th of July, matching t-shirts, my card behind the fireworks. I picked up my phone, drafted an email to my mother. No subject line yet, no greeting. I didn't hit send. But the words were there, burning quietly. I was never their safety net. I was their bank, and that's about to change. I drafted the first email. I didn't hit send. Not yet. But I knew where this was going. I didn't sleep that night. My fingers kept drumming the side of my laptop, the living room lit only by the glow of spreadsheet tabs and the slow blink of the router light in the corner. I hadn't looked at these numbers in years, not closely, but something about the way Gypsy smirked, or how my mother joked about still having the house, had unsettled something too long buried. Line by line, I went through 7 years of financial records, transfers labeled emergency, monthly deductions from an account I barely remembered linking to anyone. Then a shared access note tied to a familiar name, Lori Ann Middleton, my mother. My eyes refused to blink as the trail grew clearer. Payments that conveniently coincided with Gypsy's sudden upgrades. First a Lexus, then that ridiculous villa in Tulum she swore was a collab deal. Vacations I was never invited to. Expenses I never approved, never even saw. The kind of pattern no one would notice, unless they were looking. And now I was looking. I called the bank, just to be sure, just to hear someone else say it. Yes, the rep said after a pause. It appears joint activity was authorized. The signature matches the cosigner. That would be Lori Middleton. I couldn't even form a sentence. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was surgical, precise, the kind that slices through muscle while you're still anesthetized. I closed the laptop and sat still long enough to feel the cold through the floorboards. How do you confront someone who smiles while stealing? I whispered to no one. The next morning, Julia texted me out of nowhere. Coffee. I need to vent. Family is insane. We met at a cafe 2 blocks from my condo. She looked frazzled, half regretful, half over-caffeinated. They're already planning another spa trip, she said, stirring her oat milk latte. Gypsy swears your mom's booking the Miami suite again. I blinked. My mom? Yeah, she laughed awkwardly. With your credit line, right? She realized too late. My... What? Julia froze. Oh, God, that's what Gypsy said. I didn't know. But I already knew. I pulled out my phone and opened old credit card statements. Charges at Bal Harbour, St. Regis, designer boutiques, all under Gypsy's name, all on a card I hadn't used in over a year. Julia reached across the table. I didn't mean, Sherry, I thought you knew. I smiled thinly. I do now. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat, in the dark, staring at the wall above my TV where our last full family photo hung. 4th of July, matching t-shirts, my card behind the fireworks. I picked up my phone, drafted an email to my mother. No subject line yet, no greeting. I didn't hit send. But the words were there, burning quietly. I was never their safety net. I was their bank, and that's about to change. I drafted the first email. I didn't hit send. Not yet. But I knew where this was going. Sleep escaped me again. I scrolled aimlessly, the phone's cold glow cutting across my sheets like interrogation light. One flick. Another. Then, her face. Gypsy's live stream. 1 million likes. Countless shares. There she was, draped in silk, sipping from a champagne flute, her voice like sugared poison. You know my sister? She asked the camera. She still clips coupons, still drives that sad little sedan. Emotionally constipated, too. Hasn't hugged anyone since 2010. The laughter behind her was infectious, rehearsed. Julia's giggle in the background punched a hole through my gut. But the real blow? The sponsor tag at the bottom of the screen? Berkman and Lowell, my old client. The brand I had revived, restructured, and helped go public. They were now paying to publicly humiliate me. They monetized my pain. My silence made them stars. I dropped the phone. The clatter on hardwood didn't break me, but it should have. 5 years ago. Julia had laughed differently then, softer, real. Back when she and Travis, my childhood friend, danced barefoot at my rooftop party, lit by string lights and secondhand speakers. They had something, until Koberger, my brother, started weaving himself into the spaces between them. Little seeds. Did you see how close Travis was standing to Sherry? Or, I think Julia's only with him to get closer to the family money. By the end of that summer, Julia ghosted Travis. My friendship fractured without warning. Now she sips wine beside the woman mocking me online. We met again at a cafe out of habit, not warmth. I didn't know the brand was tied to you, she said, fiddling with her straw wrapper. You did, I replied. You just didn't think I'd find out. She looked away. Koberger said you never wanted the spotlight, that you didn't care what we did. He's wrong. We didn't finish our drinks. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by memories like chess pieces. Every generous gesture I'd made, loaning money, hosting Christmas, covering bail for Gypsy's misunderstood ex, had been weaponized, each kindness twisted into leverage. I started mapping it all out, like a case study, emotional embezzlement, disguised as loyalty. Love meant letting go, I used to think, but they used that to tighten the leash. I opened my photo archive and began deleting. The beach photos, the matching pajama shots, the ones where I was always slightly out of focus, present but blurred. Then I pulled up Berkman and Lowell's media contact. My email was short. Director, I will no longer be affiliated with your brand in any capacity. I expect all use of my likeness or background work to be removed immediately. This is non-negotiable. I didn't wait for a reply. They weaponized my past. Time to sharpen my memory. The backyard was dripping in pale pink streamers and helium balloons. A happy 65th Lori banner swayed lazily above the dessert table, while the scent of overwatered roses clung to the air. I arrived with a bottle of vintage wine wrapped in floral paper and a card I didn't mean. Smiles met me like a showroom welcome, polished, rehearsed, hollow. "Sherry, you made it," Gypsy chirped, cheeks already flushed from Chardonnay. "Wouldn't miss it," I lied. Dad offered a stiff hug, his hand briefly resting on my shoulder like an apology he couldn't say aloud. I handed Mom the gift, her fingers grazing mine with a practiced delicacy, as if proximity to me still made her feel superior. Small talk swirled like confetti. "Still working crazy hours? When will you treat yourself, honey?" "A woman your age should think about freezing eggs, you know." I nodded, smiled, swallowed. It was easier to pretend we were happy. Pretending made it harder to hear the truth. I slipped into the kitchen, needing silence. That's when I heard them. Not whispers, but the casual cruelty of people who never thought they'd be overheard. "She still thinks we love her the same," Gypsy giggled. "Bless her," Mom scoffed. "That girl's a walking ATM. Give it a few weeks. I'll come up with another hospital scare. She always takes the bait." Laughter like clinking glass. Then silence, except the cracking sound in my chest. My breath caught. My body remained frozen behind the pantry door. I didn't make a sound, though my world had tilted. All these years of compromise, of rescuing them financially, emotionally. Was it ever love? Or just extraction? Later, when the sky dimmed and the party thinned to leftover cake and cigarette ash, I found Dad on the back steps. The porch light behind him cast long shadows, like guilt trying to run away. "Did you know?" My voice barely broke the air. He didn't look up, just stared at the yard. "Sherry, don't lie, not now." He rubbed the bridge of his nose, then nodded slowly. "I knew." "How long?" "A while. Since the first loan on Koberger's name. Your mom, she said it was a temporary fix." I clenched my fists. "You let them take from me." "I didn't want the family falling apart." "But you were okay watching me fall." He flinched. "You're strong. You always bounce back." Number I just hide the bruise better. We didn't speak again. Not that night. Maybe not ever in the same way again. I left before the candles were blown out, before anyone noticed I hadn't smiled in hours. My phone buzzed with messages. "Where'd you go?" "You okay?" "Come back, we're doing cake." I didn't respond. At home, I pulled open the drawer where I kept my tax forms, old bank records, credit reports. My hands moved on muscle memory, but my mind was already elsewhere. I printed, highlighted, cross-referenced. I opened a blank Word document and typed a name. Peterson and Lang, a law firm I'd once recommended to a client in crisis. They celebrated with my money. Next year they'll be toasting to regret. "Legacy," my father had said, his voice low and sure as we stood in the backyard years ago. "This house is yours when we're gone. You've earned it. You've kept us standing." I had believed him. Not because I trusted blindly, but because I wanted to. Because somewhere buried under years of obligation and overlooked birthdays, I still wanted to believe my sacrifices meant something to someone. That illusion shattered with one PDF attachment. The email came from a paralegal I barely knew, a woman who once worked with me on a housing grant case. Her message was brief. "You might want to look at this." Attached was the title transfer, dated last summer. The house now belonged to Koberger. My father had signed it over. I stared at the screen, waiting for my heartbeat to slow, for my thoughts to catch up. They never did. Instead, a thick, heavy quiet settled in my gut. This wasn't passive betrayal. This was active. This was a lie dressed in fatherly devotion. Legacy, he said, all lies carved into the foundation. The knock came just as I closed my laptop, my phone buzzing seconds later. It was my bank. Miss Hartwell, are you aware of recent activity on a supplementary credit line opened under your name? I blinked. I don't have a supplementary credit line. Yes, you do. Opened 5 years ago. Under power of attorney. Multiple active cards. I could barely form words, but I managed. Whose name is on the cards? A pause. Lori Hartwell and Gypsy Hartwell. I hung up before I could scream. The paper trail didn't take long. I printed old statements, combed through charges, diamond bracelets from Nordstrom, 5-star hotel stays in Las Vegas, spa weekends labeled wellness retreats, all billed to me, all buried under automated payments. I never noticed because I was too busy keeping them afloat. She wore my name like a necklace, and it strangled me slowly. The weight of what they'd done, the theft, the lies, the entitlement, settled into something colder than grief. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was done being hurt. I met with Marcia that afternoon, my attorney. Her office smelled like burnt coffee and toner ink, and I found comfort in its sterility. She listened as I laid everything out. Credit fraud, identity abuse, real estate deception. She didn't flinch. We have enough to move forward, she said. They've crossed into federal territory. Are you ready for that? I nodded. I don't want revenge, I want accountability. Marcia slid a folder across the table. Then we start with this. Formal notice. Demand for disclosure. You sign this, and the clock starts ticking. I stared at the pen for a moment before I picked it up. My hand didn't shake. When I walked out of her office, the air felt different, like it belonged to me again. I wasn't asking for honesty anymore. I was demanding a reckoning. I was up late again, scrolling without meaning, just chasing sleep. The apartment was silent, save for the soft hum of my refrigerator. Then I saw it. Gypsy's face, frozen mid-laugh on a live stream thumbnail titled, How Not to Live. I should have looked away. I didn't. She was radiant, in that curated, filtered kind of way. Champagne flute in hand, voice laced with condescension. Some people still think clipping coupons is a personality, she said, giggling. You can't heal what's emotionally stunted. You can only outgrow it. The comments exploded in laughing emojis. Someone wrote, Tell us about your sister again. Another. Sounds like she needs therapy and a new wardrobe. My sister's voice echoed off the walls, but the shame didn't belong to me anymore. I closed the app without blinking. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I sat still long enough to feel the burns settle behind my ribs. That wasn't just mockery, it was assassination, and the crowd cheered her on like a coliseum of strangers hungry for blood. At sunrise, a plain envelope waited at my front door. No name, no return address. Inside, 3 pages of bank records and a typed note. You should see what Koberger did to the house. I dropped my keys. 3 separate mortgages, 3. On the same house, my name kept afloat for years. Approved under false pretenses, stacked like dominoes. The balance was bleeding into default. I drove to my father's office. He was eating oatmeal, unbothered. What is this? I tossed the documents onto his desk. He looked, blinked, then leaned back like I'd handed him a grocery list. Your brother needed help. You said it was mine. I said you kept us afloat. That's not the same as ownership. I stared at him, each syllable snapping something loose inside me. He used it for crypto. He shrugged. It was a risk. We all take them. No, Dad. I took care of you. That wasn't a risk. That was theft. His voice dropped low. You think court is the answer? That's not family. That's war. I turned to leave. Number, what you did. That was war. Back home, I spread everything across my kitchen table. Screenshots of the live stream, bank statements, mortgage documents. I read them like battlefield maps, marking timelines, circling names. It wasn't about closure anymore. It wasn't even about money. They'd turned me into a villain for surviving on my own terms. I poured myself a drink, neat, no ice. On a legal pad, I wrote one line. They want war. I'll give them paperwork. Then I dialed Marcia. She answered on the second ring. We need to talk. Tomorrow. I found out through a voicemail I wasn't supposed to get. A message from a law office thanking me for following through on the Koberger settlement. I never hired a lawyer for Koberger, but I sure as hell paid for one. I called the firm. After 5 minutes of digging and a scanned authorization form, I learned that my emergency fund, the one I set up after Mom's scare, had been partially drained to cover a private settlement. Crypto fraud. My brother's. When I confronted Dad, he didn't even pretend to be confused. You wouldn't have understood, he said flatly, barely glancing up from his laptop. He was facing jail time. So you bled me dry for damage control? His voice dropped, a note of fatherly warning. This isn't about money. It's about protecting the family name. No, I said. It's about the family name using me like a vending machine with no receipt. I left before he could respond. His silence wasn't just agreement. It was calculation. 2 days later, I met Mom for lunch at her favorite bistro downtown. Her suggestion. She wore pearls and that fake calm she used when about to deliver bad news, masked as wisdom. I know things have been tense, she started, slicing into a beet salad, but I've missed you. Her purse was propped on the table strangely, half-zipped and angled toward me. I tilted my head, pretending to reach for my phone while glancing into the gap. The reflection off a tiny lens confirmed it. She was recording. I excused myself, locked the bathroom stall, and dialed Callie, an old friend from undergrad who now worked in cybersecurity. Yeah, she said after I described the situation. That's a directional mic, probably voice-activated. Don't say another word. Back at the table, I sat down, looked Mom straight in the eye, and smiled. You look lovely, I said slowly, enunciating each word like a script. But I think you've made a tactical error. Her brows pinched slightly, not enough to break her expression, but enough to tell me she knew I knew. I didn't finish lunch. I stood, dropped a 20 for the untouched meal, and said, That was your last shot at subtlety. That night, Callie helped me retrieve the audio from the device. It had been transmitting live to a cloud account I never knew existed. I saved the file, then 3 duplicates. One on a hard drive, one in the cloud, one in a safe. Let them try to edit it. I had the raw feed. The next morning, I was in Marcia's office before she'd even finished her first coffee. This is no longer personal, I said, laying out the documents, screenshots, and a printed transcript from the microphone. She leafed through the papers, her expression darkening. Do you want to file under identity fraud or financial abuse first? I want them to feel what I felt, paper cuts that bleed out a future. Marcia looked up, her pen frozen mid-note. You ready for war? I didn't blink. They think they're playing chess, I said. I am the board. The invitation arrived like any other. Cheery font, pastel envelope, a casual brunch at the rented banquet hall downtown. A family celebration, it read. After months of silence, they wanted to eat waffles and pretend they weren't the ones holding the knives. I walked in, heels clicking on the marble, chin high. The room was already humming with fake warmth, Dad nursing a Bloody Mary, Gypsy posing by a champagne wall, and Mom air-kissing distant cousins. Then Lori smiled too widely and handed me a thin manila envelope. Just something small, she said. I opened it, expecting an apology. Instead, I got a lawsuit, emotional abuse, financial manipulation, unlawful control over shared assets. I stared at the words as if they'd been written in someone else's blood. I nodded. Excuse me. In the restroom, I stared at myself in the mirror and splashed cold water on my cheeks. The makeup held. So did I. They mistook silence for surrender, I whispered, the echo bouncing back like applause. Later that night, Julia called. Can we meet? She asked, her voice tight. It's time. We met at a roadside diner that smelled like burnt bacon and broken promises. She looked thinner, older, but her eyes, still honest. I know you probably hate me, she started. I've had better years, I said. She winced. I found voice memos, messages Koberger sent to Travis. He framed him, lied to me, about everything. She slid over a thumb drive. Bank records, too, and receipts. Your name on things you never touched. Why now? Because I let them break something good once. I won't do it again. I exhaled, unsure if it was forgiveness or fatigue rising in my chest. You're willing to testify? I already signed the affidavit. The silence between us softened. She sipped her coffee. I watched the condensation beat up and run like little escapes down the glass. 2 weeks later, we stood side by side under fluorescent lights at the press conference. Julia, still in her waitress uniform. Me, in the same navy suit I wore to my first promotion. I spoke clearly, slowly. My name is Sherry, and I've been stolen from, lied to, mocked, and manipulated by my own family. I unfolded the evidence: property transfers, forged credit documents, audio clips, and video of that microphone in my mother's purse. They called it love, I said. But it was leverage, reporters murmured, cameras flashed. Julia leaned toward me and whispered, "They'll never recover from this." A door slammed in the viewing room behind the cameras. Koberger's voice echoed down the hallway. "You'll pay for this," I smiled. No, I thought, you already did. The silence after the press conference was heavier than applause. Not a single call from my parents, no emails, no rebuttal, just silence. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like someone had kicked over a hornet's nest, and the swarm fled instead of fighting back. But I stood still. I didn't swat the air. I let the truth sting where it had to. Marcia wasn't as untouched. A week after the conference, she called me with her voice clipped and measured. "Sherry, my firm's partners pulled me in today. Someone's threatening to file an ethics complaint. An anonymous tip. They want me to step back from your case." I didn't say anything at first. I just listened to her breathe. "They're saying I'm emotionally compromised, that I crossed lines." "You didn't," I said, but I knew it wouldn't matter. "I'm not stepping down." Her voice cracked, just once. "But they'll make it hell for me." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Then we make it worth it." We had walked through fire together, and now someone was pouring gasoline beneath her feet. At night, I stared at the ceiling, remembering the exact moment I gave my father access to my emergency account. The way he called it just a formality. The way my mother smiled over the paperwork like it was a favor I was doing for myself. I believed them because I wanted to, but belief without proof is just hope-wearing perfume. I sat in my living room surrounded by legal folders and receipts that used to mean nothing to me, just paper and ink. But now they felt like bones, the bones of my trust, crushed and documented. The media began to shift, blogs, then news segments. Some anonymous Redditor had spliced Gypsy's live stream against my financial statements. The timeline was damning. People who had once mocked me online were now calling me brave. "How did she not burn the house down?" one post read. "If it were me, I would have gone full carry." My parents said nothing. My brother disappeared from socials. Gypsy posted once, "Healing isn't linear," then vanished. The spotlight cooled, and in that stillness, I began to feel free. Julia and I started meeting once a week. No lawyers, no press, just two women who had been used, then rebuilt from ash. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we just sat and let the quiet speak for us. "I didn't think you'd let me back in," she said one evening, her fingers curled around a coffee mug. "I didn't think I would either," I admitted. "But here we are." The future didn't feel like some glittering rebirth. It felt quiet, honest, mine. I got a new mailbox installed. I wanted a fresh lock. A week later, something arrived, unmarked, no return address. I almost threw it out, but I didn't. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of my father, younger, sitting with a woman I didn't recognize, her hand on his thigh, a baby stroller just behind them. On the back, one sentence in tight, careful script. You were never the only one they lied to. If you've made it this far, maybe, just maybe, you've seen a piece of yourself in my story. Maybe you've trusted the wrong people. Maybe you've been the strong one for too long, holding everyone up while no one noticed you were sinking. But here's what I've learned. Silence doesn't make you noble, and loyalty doesn't mean losing yourself. Boundaries are not betrayals, they are acts of self-respect. In a world that often shames quiet strength, choose to speak. Choose to stand. And most of all, choose you. Have you ever had to cut off someone you loved? For your own peace? Or discovered a truth that changed your entire view of family? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a 1 in the comments if this hit home, or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if this story moved you even a little, please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. More stories, more truth, more healing, together.